This is more Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to cover a somewhat controversial topic, which is Cadillac Super Cruise, and why I think it's better than Tesla Autopilot. In fact, I think Super Cruise is the best self-driving system available today in any car. Now, for those of you who don't know, Super Cruise is Cadillac's self-driving system. It is fantastic, and I recently drove the latest version of Super Cruise in the new Cadillac Escalade, and today I'm going to explain how it works and what makes it so great. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. We've had some great sales recently on Cars and Bids, including this pristine Chevy Impala SS 96 Black, beautiful, $22,000. Also, this Bentley Continental Super Sports convertible sold for almost $83,000. And this wonderful W123 Mercedes 300 TD, this gorgeous wagon, went for $23,000. If you're looking to sell your cool car from the modern era, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. And if you're looking to buy a cool car from the 1980s and up, you'll find a great selection with daily auctions of cool, interesting, and quirky cars on Cars and Bids. Okay, so let's get started on Super Cruise. Now, like I said, Super Cruise is Cadillac's self-driving system. Basically, every new car brand has this. You have Volvo Pilot Assist and Mercedes-Benz Intelligent Drive and blah, blah, blah. They all have different names for them. But basically, self-driving is kind of how I call it, or autopilot is what Tesla calls it. You get the point. The point is these are like self-driving auto steering braking systems. And they're getting really common, especially in luxury cars. The second best system is definitely Tesla Autopilot. But I think the best one is Cadillac Super Cruise, and today I'm going to explain why. Okay, so a quick overview. Cadillac Super Cruise is now offered in two Cadillac models. It started off in the CT6 sedan, the full-size sedan, and that's why you haven't heard that much about Super Cruise. Cadillac came out with this truly fantastic high-tech self-driving system, and then they put it in truly their least desirable car, a big old sedan that looks like something a funeral director would drive. And then they came out with a mid-size crossover called the XT6. And everybody thought, okay, we're going to put Super Cruise in the mid-size crossover because Super Cruise is cool and everybody wants it, and crossovers are hot, and it just makes sense to marry the two. But General Motors doesn't often do the things that would make sense to logical individuals like me and you. So the XT6 came out, no Super Cruise. So you have a crossover, no Super Cruise, and you have a large sedan with Super Cruise, even though it makes so much sense to combine them. But the point is, finally they are rolling out Super Cruise in the new Escalade, which is Cadillac's best car. And so I drove the latest Escalade recently with Super Cruise, and it's just great. So I'm going to first start with a little overview of how it works. So you turn on Super Cruise by pressing these little buttons on the steering wheel, just like you would turn on a regular cruise control system. And when you turn on Super Cruise initially, it just works as adaptive cruise control. And you can see I'm using the switch here to adjust my cruising speed, again, just like a regular cruise control system. And it's just working like standard adaptive cruise. But at some point when the vehicle is ready, this little gray steering wheel appears in the gauge cluster. And that's when you know that Super Cruise is active and it's ready to be used. The steering wheel is supposed to be informing you like, yeah, now the car can steer for you. Now, at this point, you don't have to activate Super Cruise if you don't want to. You could continue driving with normal adaptive cruise control, but if you want to switch over to Super Cruise, you press this little button on the steering wheel, and then the steering wheel lights up with this blue light on the top. You can see confirming like, hey, okay, now Super Cruise is active. And then the blue light on the steering wheel turns to a solid green light, and that is how you know that you are super cruising. Whenever the solid green light is illuminated on the steering wheel, Super Cruise is on and it is working. Now, what happens next is pretty cool. As long as the green light stays illuminated, you can keep your hands off the wheel. And as long as you're looking forward, the green light will stay illuminated indefinitely. So with a few exceptions that I will discuss in a second. But what this means is you can sit in the car for minutes, becoming hours. I mean this, hours at a time without ever touching the steering wheel. As long as you are looking forward, the car will continue to drive itself. It will steer, it will brake, it will turn, it will accelerate, and you can just do this all by itself. It will. And you never have to touch the steering wheel. You never really have to do anything except keep looking forward. You can sit here like this, as I am, looking forward pretty much for an entire fuel tank on the highway, hundreds of miles if you want to, and never really do anything but sit there like this. And Super Cruise can now change lanes for you. This is another big thing. So when you're ready to change lanes, you're super cruising, you come up to a slower car, press the turn signal stalk, and then it starts searching for an opening. Once it finds one, it automatically moves over, changes lanes, and then continues on. Once you've passed the slower car, just press the turn signal stalk again. It moves right back over. Again, all automatically. I'm not touching the steering wheel here. It's doing all of this, automatically changing lanes. So not only does this steer for you, accelerate, brake, turn, etc., it also changes lanes pretty much automatically, except for you letting it know you want to change lanes by touching the signal stalk. That is pretty impressive, frankly. It's a really, really excellent system. But worth noting, there are two crucial limitations. Number one, as I've mentioned, in order to use Super Cruise, you must be sitting in the driver's seat and looking forward. You have to be watching the road. And the reason for this is Super Cruise has this little camera mounted right here in the middle of the steering wheel, sort of, and that camera watches your eyes. And if your eyes aren't looking at the road, Super Cruise knows that you aren't actually paying attention, you're not engaging with what's happening in front of you, and so you're a risk to be behind the wheel. And then it begins flashing the green light on the steering wheel like, hey, I know you're not paying attention, you gotta pay attention to me. Now, right now, I am paying attention, I'm looking forward, but because I'm filming while I do this, my phone is blocking the vision of the camera to my eyes. And so it knows, hey, wait a minute, I can't see your eyes, you're probably not paying attention, and then it starts flashing the green light. But take the phone away, you look back, and the green light goes right back on. Now, it's worth noting you can look away from the system for like a few seconds. Like if you're gonna go change the radio station or the climate control, you can look down, that's no problem. But after like 8 or 10 seconds, that's when it starts to flash the green light and say, not so fast, you're not driving. Now, if you continue in this situation where you're not looking ahead and it knows you're not looking ahead, the flashing green light will turn into a flashing red light. And then Super Cruise will start to deactivate and it vibrates the seat and it's like, you are not driving. The car is automatically starting to slow down. You have to take control now. Super Cruise is off.
Take control of the vehicle now.
And so you always have to be looking forward in order for the system to work. So that's one big limit of Super Cruise. You never have to touch the steering wheel, but you do always have to be looking forward. Now, number two limit of Super Cruise is it only works on mapped roads. Now, a lot of Tesla people consider this to be a huge limitation of Super Cruise, but the truth is Super Cruise has mapped basically every highway in the United States and a lot of highways in Canada near population centers, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa. So that means if you're on a long road trip, Super Cruise will work because you're driving on major interstate highways. It's pretty much got all of those mapped. They have also mapped a lot of local highways too, and I think they're getting better and better with that, trying to get like the more important state highways or US highways within areas, but all the interstates are done and most of the state highways. All around San Diego, driving it, it worked on every highway that I tried. Frankly, I think 90% of drivers will almost never find themselves in a situation where Super Cruise doesn't work, and they're obviously adding more roads all the time. Now, Tesla people will say, well, wait, this is a big limitation. Super Cruise works on highways, but Tesla's system works better, on surface streets. You don't need to be on a highway or a mapped road. And that's true of not just Tesla, but most of the other brands too. They work on surface streets just fine. But there's two important points here that I think are worth mentioning. Number one, even if Super Cruise isn't functional, the car is still using an advanced adaptive cruise control system and lane keeping assist. So it still, can slow you down, speed you up, that sort of thing, even if the full self-driving, self-steering is not functional at that time. But also, this is the one that really gets me. Are you really using autopilot on non-highways or fast street? This is really surprising. Like between stoplights in cities on small roads with 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, are you really using autopilot? Truthfully, I love future technology, especially as it comes to cars, but it makes me nervous that people are using autopilot in this way if they really are. I don't think autopilot was designed for this. I think there are way too many distractions on 25-mile-an-hour streets, by schools, by apartments in dense urban areas. I would not be using autopilot there. And so when you say, oh, well, Super Cruise only works on the highways, truthfully, given the limitations of technology that we have right now, I wouldn't want to use any of these systems not on the highway. Certainly on maybe a 50-mile-an-hour, country road that isn't mapped yet, I could see it being a problem, but I think most road users who have these vehicles aren't driving in those circumstances that often. But I think if we start to get into urban areas, I'm not using autopilot. And I hope that a lot of Tesla people aren't using autopilot either in those situations. So with that in mind, let's talk about why I think Super Cruise is better than autopilot. The biggest reason is you are totally hands-off. Tesla Autopilot is great. It really is the second best of these systems. But the simple reality is that like all these other systems that don't monitor your eyes, you do have to tap the steering wheel every 30 seconds or so, or 10 or 15, depending on the brand, to let the car know, hey, I'm still here, tap. I'm still here, tap, and that kind of babysitting of the system just gets tiresome after a while. Like you're sitting there and you're looking ahead, you're paying attention, but ding, you have to touch the wheel. Okay, fine. Ding, you have to, I mean, it's repetitive, frankly, and it's not really all that necessary. And that's why Cadillac's system is great, because you're completely hands-off and you can be hands-off for a long, long time on the road. Now, otherwise, the systems are pretty similar. It's worth noting. They both change lanes automatically. They both will steer for you. They both accelerate. They both brake. The Autopilot and Super Cruise both work pretty similarly, aside from Cadillac being fully hands-off. The big drawback to Super Cruise is, of course, like I mentioned, the Tesla system works on non-mapped roads. But Cadillac, like I said, has mapped basically all of the important roads where you're going to want to use this system. And I think whether you see that as a drawback depends on how you plan to use Super Cruise and Autopilot. For me, I like to use these systems when I'm sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic on the freeway and I don't have to sit there and be on the gas, then on the brake, then on the gas, and take a tiny little turn and pay that much attention. The car that's easy stuff for autonomous technology to pick up. And for me, that's where I use this sort of thing. Or even longer, higher speeds. The Super Cruise is good with those. But that's where I like to use it. On highways, when I'm doing that kind of thing. I don't like to use these sort of systems on surface streets like I mentioned. So to me, the Cadillac flaw is way outweighed by its big benefit, which is that you can be entirely hands-off. You don't actually have to be tapping the steering wheel. It's worth noting that one other flaw of Cadillac Super Cruise is that it has only been in the CT6 up to this point, whereas Autopilot is in all of Tesla's models, all of which are far more desirable than the Cadillac CT6. But now that Super Cruise is in the Escalade, that's a big deal, because the Escalade is actually a good vehicle. So you have this full-size SUV, not going to appeal to that many Tesla people, but they are appealing to a lot of people, and the Escalade is an excellent full-size SUV. Hopefully the system now starts to trickle into other Cadillacs too. Now that we've seen it in CT6 and Escalade, I hope it gets into the XT6. It really needs to get into the next generation XT5. And so to me, the biggest flaw of Super Cruise, frankly, has been it's just not in products that are all that desirable. I wish that we could take Cadillac Super Cruise and put it in the Lincoln Aviator. Then you would have the best of all worlds. But we need to wait for Cadillac's product quality to catch up to its technology. But the Escalade is finally the best example of those two marrying right now. A good product with the good technology. So that flaw is sort of mitigated to an extent. But there you have it. I mean, that's Cadillac Super Cruise. It's a fantastic system. It works tremendously well. And this is the beginning of like the self-driving revolution. Obviously, Tesla and other brands kind of kicked it off, but I think Cadillac has taken it further than anyone else. And I really do think that Super Cruise is right now the self-driving tech to beat.